Of course, if we compare the situation to 2010, 11, 12, things are a lot better today in Europe, but there's a lot still left to be done. High unemployment. It's even worse for young unemployed people. In many EU member states, development is lacking, seriously. On the whole, though, generally speaking, economics-wise, the situation has improved in most countries, although the improvement has been greater in some than in others. Europe was founded on a number of basic principles. One of those is solidarity. And I think the people of Europe signed up to the European Union project thinking that it would guarantee them a certain level of well-being. So therefore it is key, it is crucial for Europe to keep focusing on the economic and social cohesion across Europe, across all the regions and for all citizens. Otherwise, citizens may lose their appetite for the European project. It would be disastrous for the future of young people in Europe and for my children as well. Yes, the situation is rather dire for young people in Greece. Particularly difficult for the qualified young people. They've had to leave the country for the most part. Many of them have found jobs elsewhere in the European Union, in the UK, in Germany, in France, in Belgium. But for those who stayed behind in Greece, life is quite difficult. One of my daughters still works there. I don't think there's any comparison to be made between the lives that young people today lead in Greece and elsewhere in the EU and that which I experienced when I was young. The main difference between then and now is that my generation, when we were young, we had nothing and we started working at a very young age. By law, we could only start working at the age of 12, but many started aged 8 or 9 sometimes. And what we tried to do is improve our general situation. What I tried to do myself was to improve the situation by becoming active in a trade union at the age of 15. I think that young people today have had better opportunities and have had better childhood, but with the crisis in 2008, all of that changed and it's harder for them to recover. But little by little, things are getting better. Well, my personal opinion, and also that of this institution which I represent, is that the European Union needs China, and China needs the European Union. And therefore, as I said recently in Beijing at the end of June of this year, what we need to do is seek the best possible, the closest possible form of cooperation between us that leaves no winners and no losers. And I think that is possible. And I'm fully in favour of Chinese investment in Greece. As far as I can tell, things are going quite well. This is an initiative that's been discussed in the Economic and Social Committee for many years, for about 2 years now, I think. We fully support the initiative. However, it's very important that there's a constructive dialogue between all the parties involved. That's the way we tend to do things here in this institution, and it's in that spirit that I went to Beijing late June to discuss at roundtable discussions between the European Economic and Social Council Committee and the Chinese counterpart. And I think that this cooperation between our institutions has been very good so far. Well, the issue of development and sustainable development is obviously a very important issue for everyone across the globe. And I think it's a very good thing that China has signed the Paris Agreement. It is unfortunate, I would say, even shameful, scandalous, that the recently elected American president seeks to withdraw from this agreement. In my personal opinion, it's very much an ethical issue as well. Our generations and the generations of people currently living on the planet have inherited a planet in a certain state, and I don't think we have any right to destroy it. In fact, I would say that we even have a duty to preserve it and leave it in an acceptable state for future generations, and for that we will have to act. And what do I mean when I say that we need to act? Well, I mean we need tangible measures put in place, and the costs of these measures need to be distributed fairly. Let me give an example of what I mean. In Europe anyway, if a decision is made to close down a lignite mine because the energy produced from lignite is too polluting and releases too much greenhouse gas, then what needs to be done, then that's fine, but what needs to be done first and foremost is to ensure that there's a backup plan so that all the families, all the workers who make ends meet from this mine continue to survive once it's been closed down. So it's all well and good to take measures to protect the environment, but those measures must not come at the detriment of citizens. I think that's completely unacceptable, and that's why I say the costs need to be distributed fairly. Another issue which is currently pressing in Europe is the huge influx of refugees. I believe that we have a duty to offer them protection and asylum to all people who are fleeing situations of war, death or persecution. So we're dealing with this migrant challenge. It's an enormous challenge. There are millions of people from other continents, Africa, Asia, coming to Europe, and not only to Europe. I fear that very soon in all developed countries, including China, we're going to face increasing numbers of people moving for climate-related reasons. There'll be climate migrants. I think it is possible, but like I said, it's very important for there to be constructive discussions and there to be cooperation, and this needs to be done in such a way that there are no winners and losers, and I think there is a way to do that through this process and others. Well, perhaps there are some circles where people are worried about a massive influx of Chinese products. That may be understandable. But what I think is very important is for the process to be done in an organized, negotiated fashion, not to be anarchical. There must be no winners and no losers, which means that there needs to be agreement. It needs to be mutually beneficial. If one side comes up stronger than the other, then no agreement is possible, and I think or cannot function. And I think that reciprocity is also very important. Well, as you know, this is a consultative body, and according to the EU treaties, it needs to be consulted on most issues which fall under EU competencies. The Commission has to consult our institution at the proposal phase. Then we can draft an opinion which is sent to the co-deciding bodies, the Council of Ministers, of course, and the European Parliament. And we can then have an influence, we can influence policy once our opinions are adopted with a wide majority or preferably unanimously. Well, President Juncker consulted us on the issue of social fundamental rights. We then emitted an opinion on that issue, and our hope is, of course, that this will be adopted and that it will influence the decisions that are then made. We also sent a document to the President on the future of Europe, following the Commission's white paper on the same topic. More tangible measures are currently still under discussion with regards to the various scenarios that the Commission put forward, because of course there was more than just one. In the past, we have been consulted on various important topics, and in certain cases the opinion of this committee then became the official European position. I'll give you an example, which is the example of the Charter on Fundamental Social Rights, which is now an integral part of the European body of treaties, and it's a text that was voted by the European Economic and Social Committee. I had the honor, I can say no, not a rise of protectionism. I had the honor of receiving President Juncker here at our plenary session, which was held just 10 days ago. And he said that reciprocity was key, even on the topic of investments. What he said was that if there is total freedom in Europe to invest in any sector, then the same should exist in China. It really is an issue of reciprocity. It's got nothing to do with protectionism. And then, if I may speak in a personal capacity, I think that China probably also has key sectors which the state seeks to protect, and that may potentially be the case in Europe as well. But that would definitely be the exception and not the rule. And again, in a personal capacity, I can tell you that if, for example, a multinational company, because contrary to the past, you don't really have people to deal with as these big companies, impersonal companies. If a multinational company that does business in an EU state were to be bought out by a Chinese company, or any other company for that matter, and the objective of that purchase was to then close down the company, I think it would be quite normal for European governments and citizens to be up in arms. And the same would be true if that happened in China. But if the purpose of the investment was a bona fide buyout to make the company prosper and, of course, take the benefits of it, then I don't see any problem with that type of investment. Well, as I've said, the issue of Chinese investment in Greece is definitely not a problem. I have heard no complaints. There are various investments, such as in the Port of Piraeus, etc. I don't have the details. But what you've said is very true. I don't think that the problem is so much a problem of Chinese companies, but of the behavior of various multinationals. Let's take Caterpillar, for example, which closed down one of its plants here in Belgium to move that same plant to France and then close that down. I think really it is a general issue. It doesn't have anything to do with the relationship between China and the EU. I think workers, first and foremost, and then citizens are inevitably going to protest if a profitable company is bought by a multinational for the purpose of shutting it down. It's completely understandable that they would react in that way, but I don't think it's got to do with Chinese companies specifically. Well, I have no lessons to give to China. Of course, I am a Greek, and that means that I have a deep-seated respect for Chinese civilization and Chinese culture, which is among the oldest of the planet. I know that there have been internal tensions and problems in China, but I'm also very much aware of the great progress that has been achieved in the last 50 years. I can only hope that the decisions made at the Congress will go in the direction of maintaining world peace and cooperation, especially reinforced cooperation with EU countries. That said, I'm not a politician. I was invited with a delegation from here to Beijing to visit the Economic and Social Committee of China. Next year we'll be receiving one of their delegations, either in Brussels or elsewhere in Europe. That hasn't been decided yet, and I would invite you to come along and follow the roundtable discussions. Well, negotiations do take time, that's a fact. I myself am not informed of what's going on. I just know what I know from speaking with my counterparts. But I think that it's safe to say that as long as the negotiations are ongoing, there is hope that the result will be positive. At least that's what I personally hope.